As we watch and listen to our stomach growling video, we are going to tell a story about the villages where the dead return. In the neighboring villages of Blackwood and Ash Hollow, death was not the end. When someone died and was buried, they came back. Sometimes they returned home the very next day. Other times they reappeared in the exact place where death had found them and simply continued whatever they had been doing before they died. The dead returned to their farms. They returned to their workshops. They returned to their families. And everyone acted as though nothing unusual had happened. No one talked about the death. No one mentioned the funeral. No one spoke of the burial. The living welcomed the dead back into their homes and carried on as if they had never left. For generations, this strange custom had been accepted as part of life. But there was another thing Blackwood and Ash Hollow had shared for just as long. War. The two villages had been enemies for so many years that nobody remembered how the conflict had begun. Fields were burned. Livestock was stolen. Trade routes became dangerous. Families lost fathers, husbands, sons, and brothers. The people who suffered most were those who lived near the border between the villages. Traveling from one village to the other had become nearly impossible. Anyone could be mistaken for a spy. Anyone could be accused of helping the enemy. One wrong encounter could mean death. In Blackwood lived a young woman named Sarah Bennett. Sarah had recently given birth to a baby girl. What should have been the happiest day of her life quickly became one of the worst. Her husband, Thomas Bennett, had desperately wanted a son. When he learned the baby was a girl, his disappointment turned into bitterness. Life had never been easy for Sarah. Thomas drank heavily and often came home angry. His two older wives, Margaret and Helen, treated Sarah poorly and made sure she knew she was the youngest and least important woman in the household. During her pregnancy, things had changed for a while. Everyone believed she was carrying a boy. For the first time, she felt respected. Her husband defended her. The other wives treated her with caution. Sarah endured every hardship because she believed her son would finally secure her place in the family. Then the baby arrived. A daughter. The respect disappeared overnight. Smiles vanished. The kindness ended. Even Thomas, the man who had once promised to protect her, turned against her. Every day became harder than the one before. The insults grew worse. The humiliation deepened. Eventually, Sarah could not take it anymore. She decided to leave. Across the border in Ash Hollow lived her closest friend, a woman she had known since childhood. Reaching her would mean crossing dangerous territory during wartime, but remaining at home felt even worse. One night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Sarah wrapped her newborn daughter against her chest and slipped quietly out of the house. The moonlight guided her along a narrow path toward the border. She was almost there when tragedy struck. Border guards spotted movement in the darkness. Believing he had found an enemy scout, he raised his rifle and fired. The gunshot echoed through the night. Pain exploded through Sarah's body. She fell to the ground. Her baby began crying immediately. Sakinandasmo guard approached cautiously. When he realized he had shot a woman carrying a child, disappointment crossed his face. She was not a soldier. She was not a spy. She was not even from his village. Without saying a word, he turned around and walked away. He left Sarah bleeding in the darkness. He ignored the cries of the newborn he left, both mother and child, to die. But Sarah refused to give up. Fighting through unbearable pain, she forced herself to her feet. Blood soaked her dress. Her vision blurred. Every step felt impossible. Still, she kept moving. She only needed to reach her friend's house just a little farther, a little farther. Then her strength gave out. The world spun around her. Darkness closed over her eyes. Sarah collapsed beside the road. The next morning, Edward Whitmore, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the region, was returning from a business meeting in a nearby settlement. His convoy traveled along the same road. Suddenly, one of the drivers brought the lead wagon to a stop. The entire convoy halted. Edward leaned out from his carriage. "Why have we stopped?" he asked. "My lord," one of his guards replied, "there's a woman lying in the road." "A woman?" "Yes, sir, and she has a baby with her." Curious, Edward stepped down from his carriage. Dressed in expensive clothes and polished boots, he walked toward the front of the convoy. The servants and guards moved aside to let him pass. When he reached the scene, he saw Sarah lying in a pool of blood. The baby strapped to her chest was crying weakly. The woman appeared dead. Edward stared at her for a moment before crouching beside her. As he reached for the child, a hand suddenly grabbed his wrist. Several guards jumped back in shock. Sarah's eyes snapped open, bloodshot and exhausted. They locked onto his. "What are you doing with my baby?" she whispered. "She's my daughter." For a moment, her grip remained strong. Then it weakened. Her hand slipped away. Her arm fell lifelessly to the ground. Edward remained silent. Sarah knew she was dying. There was no strength left in her body. No way to protect her child. "My daughter's name is Grace," she whispered. Edward listened without speaking. "I know the kind of man you are." She struggled for breath. "I know that when she grows up, you may use her however you want. You may marry her off. You may sell her future to the highest bidder." Tears filled her eyes. "But please," her voice cracked, "don't give her to a man with many wives." She swallowed painfully. "Don't let her suffer the way I suffered." For a moment, she looked at her daughter. Then the last of her strength disappeared. This time, she did not move again. Edward carefully loosened her hand from the baby. Even in death, her fingers had clung tightly to the child. He lifted little Grace and handed her to one of his female servants. Then he returned to his carriage. As the convoy continued its journey, Edward briefly thought about Sarah's final request. Then he dismissed it. Who was she to tell him what to do? She had been poor, powerless, forgettable. Men like Edward answered only to people with wealth and influence. The wishes of a dying woman meant nothing. Looking out at the passing countryside, he smiled to himself. Another servant had been added to his household, and when the girl grew older, her future would belong to him. What Edward Whitmore did not know was that in Blackwood and Ash Hollow, the dead never stayed dead. And before long, Sarah Bennett would be coming home.